All right, everybody, we're live on our channel office hours, this one for the month of March. We're kicking things off. We're going to let the social channels catch up with the live stream and get things going. I am Nick Weber, moderator, host with Bayer and Channel. So happy to be here again on a lovely Friday out of St. Louis. Hopefully you're experiencing the same events in your neck of the woods. Today we got a kind of a planting palooza is what we're calling it. So the time is here. It's here for many other people who have already started planting or have finished in the southern parts of the geographies. But here in the Midwest, we're going to be cracking here in the next probably week or so. Really hot and heavy here. So we got a couple folks from that area. We got Lindsey McKinzie from over in the Illinois area, southern Illinois area. Mike Mullins from up in northern Missouri, and then Todd Steinacher, who's one of our seed pros. So we have a first in this session. We got our first seed pro to join our Channel Agronomy Office Hours, and we're excited to have everyone here, but in particular Todd, as he's representing the brand for our customers. So thanks for all of you joining us. Today we're going to dive into quite a few topics, try to make them quick hitting, and definitely as an audience, if you're listening, please put your questions in the chat that you're on, whether it's Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. We'd love to have some input from you as farmer customers, as other seed pros, other agronomists, kind of talk about what we're talking about, and if you have any questions for our panel here. So let's just jump right into it. I'm going to start with Mike, and Mike, kind of the first thing to get things rolling is you got to make sure your planter's all ready to go. So if you can kind of take us through some things you recommend to your seed pros and your customers in your neck of the woods, maybe sort of those top 3, 5, however many tips there are. I'm sure there's more than that even, but kind of get into what that means to say, get your planter ready to go as you get ready to plant some corn and soybeans this year.
Thanks, Nick. I appreciate the question. And we've kind of got a slide in here that kind of shows a part of a planter that I've got here. And everybody always thinks about the combine rolling through and the yields that we get. But truly, what we need to realize is the planter is actually what starts everything out. And we need to have a really good planter maintenance program to get actually everything started. So when you think about a planter row unit right here, and this is, kind of a standard Deere unit on one of their high-speed planters, is that parallel linkage is a main important part. You got 4 linkage brackets up there that ties it to the main frame of the planter. And once you get that wore pretty bad in those bushings and pins, that whole unit will start moving sideways left to right. It's going to create a lot of issues with that planter row unit as it's going through the field. Next thing when you think about is your row cleaners. If you've actually got a row cleaner that's pushing too deep into the soil, you're plowing really bad and you're putting a real large furrow in there. And what can happen is if you get a large rainstorm that comes back through, it's going to turn and it's going to pull all that dirt back over to the top of your seed trench. And what that's going to do is going to create more soil over the top of that. It's going to make it harder for that seed to emerge. And once you continue on back to it, you think about your row openers, both of the disc openers right there. When you think about the wear, and what happens is you're truly, once they start wearing down really fast, you're going to get not a true seed trench opening. You're going to get what's called a W trench. You're going to have more air gap down in that seed to soil contact. And with that being said, it's going to have a lot of issue of trying to get good seed to soil contact for that germination and emergence to start. Another thing is on your seed meters. One good thing about seed meters is as fast as they're spinning and turning, there's a lot of wear parts on a seed meter, and having them periodically checked with your local service technician and have your meters run on the stand to see what your singulation is and any repairs needed to help good singulation as you're coming into that furrow. One thing about it is when we think about it is back in the day, we're running 4 to 4.5 mile an hour when we're planting. With these new high-speed planters, we're running 11, 12 mile an hour. So when you think about the speed of these planters running through the fields, you've got a lot more movement, which can actually help or hinder you when it comes to seed to soil contact. So looking at all your wear parts and making sure you're ready to go to the field, because like I said, the planters is the starting to get that seed in good emergence is what we need, uniform emergence. And that all starts with a planter.
So you just can't, take the family vacation and get in the station wagon or the minivan and go. You have to, with planting, you got to kind of take some time to get everything set up and take a really hard look at what's happening behind the scenes, so to speak.
You sure do, Nick. And the one thing is, well, I get this, hey, Mike, when I put it in the shed, it was planting fine. But what happened this year? It's we got to take a little time to take a look at it and make sure everything's ready to go.
Is there anything that you recommend? And then we'll get over to Lindsey and Todd here. But like if we have planting delays, say, hey, you got out and you got a couple good days of planting, and then you put that planter back in the shed. Is it worth kind of checking in between those downtimes, if you will, to make sure everything's still going okay?
And that's a good question there, Nick, because that's the thing when you're moving from farm to farm and different soil types. Your seeding depth is something that you always need to be checking. And that's one thing we try to instill is you've got to get out of that cab, get down, dig in the dirt and see actually where that seed's being placed, and making some adjustments on the fly is what a person needs to do. Because say you're going from a field that's a sandy bottom and then you hit into a heavy silty clay loam, there's going to be some fine tuning to make sure we're getting a good representation of that field and getting that seed to soil contact at the right depth.
Yeah, that's good. And so planter, we covered that fairly quickly in 3 or 4 minutes, and we could probably do a whole session on that. But I think the sort of next logical step is you've done your planter checkup, seen how things are going. Lindsey, it's okay. Now we got to put the seed in the soil, and I think product placement is a huge part of what an agronomist does, and SeedPro as well. So I wanted to kind of turn that over to you and Todd here to say, what are some of the quick tips that you guys recommend when it comes to product placement at this time of year?
Thanks, Nick. For me, one big thing I always like to talk about with product placement is our corn hybrids and soybean varieties. I like to compare them to a person. We all have our own personalities and we all have our own quirks. These corn hybrids are the exact same way. There are some that you can go throw anywhere and they're going to do just fine, but some are a little more particular and maybe they prefer a better soil type. And so for me, in order to have ultimate success at the end of the year, it really starts with product placement, making sure that we're talking to our seed pros, our FSRs, our technical agronomists that we work with, and just making sure that we're setting that seed up for success, which in turn leads to farm success at the end of the year.
Todd, what are some things as a seed pro, getting into that side of it, going from talking with your agronomist like a Lindsey or a Mike, and then ultimately kind of conferring with the customer? What are some of those conversations you typically have this time of year with your folks?
Well, for the most part, back in November, December is when we made a lot of our strong pitches for these products, of the features and benefits and all the great things. So right now it's a great time to review, the positives and negatives of those particular products, just to make sure we do place them right. Usually make sure, hey, if a particular farm it lays wet or has very well drainage, there's always gonna be hybrids that do or don't like that. So those are the big ticket items. Make sure those are there. Root types and root structures are really going to drive, how things can handle on, wet soils or heavier clay. So again, just reevaluating the features and benefits and some of the risk and rewards associated to that hybrid, and make sure we get placement right based off what we built in the plan back in November and December. Let's make sure we're executing on what we built.
Yeah, and we all can have a good plan, like Mike Tyson likes to say, until you get punched in the face, right? And sometimes Mother Nature gives us a couple roundhouses. So how do you adapt to that with your growers, right? You can make all those plans of the best hybrid on the best acre, but sometimes you get those rains or conditions don't quite match up, and guys just need to go. What's that relationship look like from your standpoint as a seed pro and connecting with customers in that sense, to like either caution them to like, hey, we had a plan, let's stick to the plan, or yeah, I'm here to help you kind of make those adjustments on the fly?
So one, hopefully back in November, December, we put a flexible plan together to start with that allows for that mobility and not having a particular hybrid or variety that's very exclusive to this environment. So hopefully we've already built that into our program. But the other thing is staying in contact with the growers and just kind of, I'll say, just feeding a little bit of dog treats to them every once in a while. Hey, here's just a little bit of information with these hybrids. Don't flood them with it, but hey, based off the current environment, this is how I would alter this particular product, or let's switch farms. Really until we get some major aggressive changes in the environment, we don't want to make a lot of changes because we've got very good seed, got very good germ seed treatments that's going to support a lot of this vulnerability, but just be there to kind of tweak those recommendations is very important.
Yeah. And I think you've got a slide that we want to show up here. I'm not going to pretend to know everything on it, but it kind of speaks to some of that product placement, emergence, some of these early season things that you guys to show off here. So I think we'll have a slide pull up here, and I'd like you to kind of explain what that looks like and how you use that with your customers.
So this particular data set, it was actually from 2020 in Central Illinois. If everybody remembers that, that was the spring where soil temperatures were very cool, but were dry. Ground was working nice. Guys are trying to decide, should we be planting? Should we not? What should we be doing? And if you kind of follow it, I actually had little turkey thermometers in the soil tracking the temperature across that big event from April 19th, 20, and 21st at surface layer. So surface would be the green bar. So that's what was the most influential by air temperature coming down. The next one would be at 1 inch. And then the orange kind of yellow is 2 inches, showing the temperature change, how, soils do insulate the seed and protect it, but it is also vulnerable to the outside air temperature. So as our air temperature dropped during those times, there in the 21st around, 1 o'clock, we did get into that black bar is 32 degrees. So we did get into a freezing event very shortly. And we can see that it did bring down the soil temperature in the first inch and second inch. However, it never got into a strong threatening position. So to me, if we are going to plant early, challenging conditions, seeding depth is going to be very critical. So let's not do two things wrong at the same time, as they say. So if we are going to plant earlier, we know conditions maybe aren't great, but conditions are technically good on the other side. Let's make sure our seeding depth is good. So we don't have this inhibitional chilling effect. We don't have, all these plants that are delayed past 72 hours, and we have emergence issues. And then we don't have marketable ears. So yes, we can't control the soil temperatures, air temperatures. We can control when we plant, but we also can control our seeding depth. And that's why it's so very critical to make sure that seeding depth is pretty consistent and stable. And I run into issues over the years going on service calls is too often, maybe the planter was set at 2 inches, but our units jump through the field. And so when it jumps, it's placing that seed shallower than what we desired. And if for some reason we were already shallow to start with, now that seed is even shallower than the grower originally had projected and needed. So again, if conditions are ideal, we probably don't see a lot of problems. But as we start planting earlier, more in these adverse conditions and earlier opportunities to go after higher yields and be more logistically sound, we've got this other risk associated to it. So seeding depth is so critically important.
Yeah. It gets back to what Mike had mentioned earlier, like, pausing 5 minutes here and there to just get out and check and make sure everything's kind of going as planned or as you hoped, right with the planter and with the seeding check.
Absolutely.
Mike, coming back to you here, kind of building off some of the soil temperature discussion, and Lindsey, certainly get to you on this as well, but because you're both in different areas, I want to hear what your recommendations are. But we've got some nice weather today, at least in St. Louis. I think, and across some of the Midwest, it's going to be in the 70s and 80s. But we got some rain event on the other side of that, like Todd said, there'll be some inhibitional chilling happen when you get some cold weather and rains, and we're going to get that here in the next couple of days. So I got a couple slides, I think, or one slide you want to show where showing the differences in some of the emergence opportunities that lay ahead if you were to kind of go on certain days. So kind of talk about some of those things that go through your head as you're making some of these recommendations to our customers.
No, thanks, Nick. And then when you think about the slide that's going to pop up here, what I did is I ran 3 different planting date scenarios in Northwest Missouri, up in the Maryville area. And when you think about looking at this, one of the actual dates is I actually put in as a planting date is today, 3/28. And so when you take a look at that slides, and with our emergence risk tool that we kind of run and we talk with our seed pros, and when we're talking with our customers about when we need to go and plant, you can see on the first day it was set at a planting date of 3/25, the second date at 3/28, which is today, and then I put in a third date in April. And when you look at all 3 of those references right there in GDU calculations, we're looking at least anywhere from 2 weeks all the way out almost to 20 days. And so when you think about emergence at 20, figure on a planting date today with the weather patterns that we're going to get, yes, we have a potential to hit 77 degrees today. And I mean, everything is optimal. Everybody wants to go, go, go. But when you look at the weather swings that we're going to have coming into this weekend, with rain, and our temperatures are going to drop down into the 60s. Lows are going to, and for the highs, lows are going to be into the upper 30s to 40s. We're not going to accumulate those GDU heat units of what we need to get that corn emerged. So when you think about 2 weeks out to almost 2.5 weeks, really we're not doing that seed any justice by just sitting in the ground, and we really need some heat accumulation. So when I'm talking to guys as far as when we need to plant corn, beans are a little bit more hardy with a good seed treatment, and we can weather the storm coming through there. But when we go back to think about inhibitional chilling of corn with cold rain and the soil temps, because it's going to drop the soil temps down like we were talking about earlier with Todd, that can affect that corn emergence. And so we want uniformity, and we want all that corn to come up at the same time to establish a good stand. And when we think about those trends on those GDUs, we're like riding a roller coaster. And, we're going to hit a really good day. Like I said, today it's 77, but boom, we're going to plunge. We're going to get some really cold rain. And then when you look at the forecast farther into next week, we're going to get into some more weather. And that's when you think about that emergence risk tool that we have available, that helps bridge that gap to talk with our producers when we have products that, maybe they can take a little bit cooler temperatures and emerge. And that's where those conversations with the SeedPro and our customers come into hand in hand with our products.
Yeah, and Lindsey, that kind of gets to that product placement discussion, right? Of understanding what seeds rocket out of the ground and what seeds maybe are a little bit slower, and that goes across lots of brands, and lots of hybrids have those capabilities. And so I think it's those discussions that you guys have as agronomists, your seed pros, and you come over from a different standpoint of being in Southern Illinois, where you're probably maybe a week or two earlier of any planting window for a guy like Mike. Kind of talk about, I kind of liken it to, like Mike was saying, is you get that seed in the ground. It's like if go jump in a pool, a swimming pool right now in St. Louis, and you probably freeze your butt off, right? So we don't want the seed being the same way. And so I think from a Southern Illinois perspective, what are some of those things you think about when you're talking about product placement, soil type, weather patterns that are happening? I mean, there's a lot of crap you guys have to think about to get that crop off on the right foot.
Absolutely. And I'll say for my territory specifically, there has been some beans put in the ground, I would say, in the last 2 weeks. And so back to Mike's point, beans are a lot more hardy than corn. And I always like to say corn can't see a bad day. And I really like to see corn up in 5 to 7 days with a nice even emergence, because and the data shows, looking towards harvest, if we have uneven emergence, and I believe Todd had a comment about non-marketable ears. I mean, we definitely can see differences in corn that has been up for a few days compared to some that's just now poking out of the ground. And being able to keep that emergence really consistent, that's one piece of the puzzle whenever we think about yield. Now, right. Soybeans, having a good seed treatment, especially if we're going to push an early planted condition scenario, that is definitely a key factor. So in the north, like I said, we've had some beans in the ground now for a couple weeks. I don't expect them to be up for probably another couple weeks at least, just seeing the temperature swings that we're about to go through, and the potential rain patterns we're seeing for the next 7 days.
Yeah, we've just sticking with that bean conversation quickly. I think sometimes even on this discussion, beans have been second the stepchild here, but like just to hit on beans real quick too is like you said, they're hardier. We've done a lot of early planting studies from Bayer, and certainly other companies and universities have as well, and trying to capture some information about the bean situation, and we've learned a lot in the last few years, it seems like, from that whole mindset of corn has to be first, then beans. So like guys are being a little more flexible with how they go approach those things, and like you said, it's they can kind of withstand things a little bit better, and so it's changing the dynamics a little bit in your area.
Yes, and one thing, even moving farther south, and usually my southern guys were about 1 to 2 weeks behind the northern part of the territory just due to weather and moisture, but also seeing a big shift into early planted soybeans into the southern part of the territory. So the whole conversation around early planted beans has changed the game, and I think it also sets our corn up for more success because we are pushing that corn planting into more of that warmer time window, which we like to see just from basic agronomics.
Yeah, that's good. And offer anyone on the chat that's listening to the video. Hopefully, there are some people watching. Ask a question in the chats or in the comments, and we'll try to get to it as best we can here as we go along. About halfway through our discussion, so I'm going to turn over to Todd and talk a little bit about nutrient management in the early season and what that looks like and some early recommendations. Obviously, fertility programs have already been implemented for the most part. There's some things you can do with side dressing and other stuff as you go through the season, but kind of want to get your perspective from a fertility program, what you look at as a seed pro, whether it's part of that preseason planning discussion you had back in November when it comes to picking a seed, right? And selecting seed to match the field, but also the fertility program to match that.
Yeah, so I'll be honest. I'm kind of a fertility nut when it comes to growing corn, just because that's a big variable. You know, we shoot for these high yields. We got to feed it, and so often, you know, over the years, I've gone to test fields, tissue samples, sap tests, plant available nitrogen, all these different things, and the environment changes so often. And if we keep just doing the same thing, our playbook the same, we're gonna take it, you know, pretty hard at some point. A couple of things that I fear or have seen guys get down a squirrely rabbit hole is front loading all our nitrogen. You know, we have hybrids that like to have a steady concentrated diet, just like we all do throughout the day, throughout our lives. And we get some hybrids, these higher yielding hybrids. We get to 3/4 milk line. There is still a lot of yield left to be converted. But if we put all of our fertility fall or early spring, and we're relying on that to stay in mineralization to take that crop to these higher yielding plateaus, I think we're chasing a rabbit that's going to cause some problems. Over the years, I've always kind of questioned from mineralization standpoint. Yes, based off organic matter, you know, labs tell us that we can get X amount of nitrogen. Great, but that's still kind of a range. You know, we say yes, we're going to get that, so we put that into our calculation. In this given year, did we actually get that? So did we falsely math out how much nitrogen credit we're going to get? And then my bigger piece is, okay, we are going to get this mineralization from organic matter. It's going to vary across a lot of variables throughout the field. When we're going to get it, when we get it, is it going to be positionally available to the crop to where it can have it, or did it get converted early? Like last year, my part of the world, we ended up getting 5 inches of rain that probably flushed a lot of that out. Granted, it re-kickstarted later in the season, but at some point, did we not do the math right, or take that into consideration and alter how we're now going to side dress and do wide drops, late season AMS, you know, all these different things that we need that correction. And the hard thing is, if we spend all of our budget on the front side, we have those environmental issues. We either sit back and increase our costs, which we don't want to do right now, or we say we're not going to increase our costs. Now we're going to sacrifice bushels. And so by having that plan with flexibility is going to help us. And so often, I'll be honest, when I've done a lot of tests, I go on service calls, I do audits in the fall. Nitrogen and sulfur are still two of our biggest challenges, and it's not because we don't put enough out there. It's just because it's not positionally available. So rethinking how we manage and track and give credits to nitrogen and sulfur is going to be super critical in 25, but also many crops coming forward.
What's some of the feedback you get from customers as you present that sort of your vision or your ideas of what you have there? Is that something that's getting picked up a lot more, or is it sort of like you said, there's obviously a financial component, economics that play a role in that? So everybody can't do everything, of course, but what's some of the conversations you have with growers? Are they more apt to sort of think about this from that like steady diet approach you mentioned?
Well, so I kind of take it from a standpoint. I've always called them audits. I go out in a lot of fields and do these samples and show. So I always take the data, the pictures, the validation of all this stuff. So it's not just theory or just some goofy thing Todd thinks up when he's drinking coffee on Friday mornings. But I actually have reasons behind it, and then we just take baby steps to it. And so it's not like, well, hey, you have to do it this cookie cutter way. You know, hey, what do you have logistically in our area? The supply of the products we have, you know, do you have on planter? Can you side drip? You know, we just start diving into all these what ifs and then building a plan that can support it. And then because not everybody's got the same products, not everybody's got the same access to certain equipment and products and labor. I get all those things, totally get it. So, logistics is going to be a big piece of it. So you just have to build into what you have to work with. And I'll be honest, we're still agronomists. We got to shoot from the hip.
Yeah. Lindsey, Mike, any conversation to add to there with the fertility stuff that you guys encounter or talk about in your experiences?
Well, Nick, Todd brought up a good comment. Last year in Missouri, we had a lot of late season rains, a lot of nitrogen leaching, denitrification, and there was a lot of, front loading like Todd was talking about, and a lot of unplanned, rescue applications of nitrogen that had to be applied. And so when you think about that, is there a way that we can cut back our upfront, like Todd's saying, maybe pull back a little bit on our spring anhydrous, then come back in, at V4, V5 and in top dress, whether you're going to use ammonium nitrate, urea, whatever, and keep that spoon feeding that system as we're going through the year. There is, like you're saying, with the pushing of our hybrids to the next yield potential and to reach those plateaus, I get customers asking me, say, hey, Mike, how am I going to get to that 320 bushel next plateau? What do I need to do to get to that? And it's a lot of combinations, when we think about that. So, a good nutrient plan is a great start, but Mother Nature, as we all know, throws us a big curveball. And so we kind of have to have a situation where, how are we going to overcome that? If that would happen, but have a second game plan to push those hybrids to that next yielding envelope.
Lindsey?
Yeah, so I can't disagree with anything that Todd or Mike has said up to this point. But I will say one thing I'm a big proponent of is tissue testing, and making sure we're hitting those right timings as we continue throughout the season to see, what does our plant need, or what are we good on that we don't need to spend maybe those extra few bucks in the season, but also trying to be financially responsible as well. So I just think having a game plan, like we've said, is a great idea. But also being able to pivot and being flexible to our plan B.
Yeah. Good deal. One more topic to cover here. I see a question we got in that we'll get to toward the end. But definitely, if you're listening, please put in a question or a comment, and we'll get to it here at the end. But one more topic, the planting Palooza, as we're calling it here. Let's talk about pre-emergent herbicides. The three of you are in areas that haven't really gotten full bore on planting yet, so maybe there's some things that have happened from an emergence herbicide perspective and programs you want to talk about. And seed treatments too. Kind of touch on those. Some of those decisions have obviously already been made, but kind of just want to get staying with Lindsey here. Some of your 2, 3, 4 things that you highlight to folks when it comes to a pre-emergent program or thinking about seed treatments. And again, all this in the mindset of what's the best thing to get the crop off to the best start in the season that we have.
So my first thing that I like to think about when we talk about herbicide programs is staying clean, and that is so important. Because if we get off to a rough start, it's going to be really hard to get clean by the end of the season. The way that water hemp is emerging and growing, and especially, I'm sure in most parts of the world, it's a very, very smart weed, so very difficult to manage if we don't get a good handle on it at the beginning. Not wanting to provide any extra competition for our corn and soybean crop, so getting ahead on the pre-emergence program is extremely important. The plug I'll put in for seed treatments, early planted beans, and we've brought it up today, is becoming more and more of a hot topic. And as we push that planting window, we are going to start running into some more less than ideal conditions, like we have seen multiple years all across the U.S. And so having a good solid seed treatment to protect our seed against early seedling diseases, which those consequences we can see those all throughout the season and especially into harvest. So making sure we keep that plant healthy and off to a good start, because a healthy plant is a happy plant, and that's what we want to see throughout the season. So early season is so important, and we only get to do it once, hopefully once. So we want to make sure we get off to the best start as possible.
Yeah, and Mike, it's catching those weeds when they're small or not even out of the ground, right? It's getting that program ready to go for the season. Mike, you there, Mike?
Nick, I'll jump in, and I agree 100% with what Lindsey had said there. When we think about, we look at input costs, we look at what the price of the commodities are doing right now. And we all know that our customers are looking at about every way that they can to kind of save money and move things in the right direction. One thing that, what we need to really talk about and address is, a lot of generic herbicides are going to be used. And the one thing that I try to talk with customers and my seed pros though too is you really need to look at the chemistry loads in those generics, because when you think about premium products, usually the high amount of salts, let's for instance use Roundup Pyramax 3. When you look at the salt content of it, there's a lot more salt in it than there is a lot of the generics. So when you're thinking about applications of a herbicide, especially a Roundup, the use rate is less versus what you're thinking about what you'd have to run on a generic. So a lot of that is you need to really look at the loading amounts and what those herbicides have of a generic versus, say let's say Trivol, for instance, when you think about, as a pre-emergence. And like I said, those are topics that, we need to have conversations, because that also comes back to when you think about the competition of the weeds. If the weeds are continuing to grow and you get weeds that are 6 inches out there, they're hard to control. And, with that being said, is we need to start clean, going back to what Lindsey said, start clean and stay clean throughout the whole process, whether it's corn or soybeans.
Yeah. And Todd, it's I've heard one of our tech development reps from Nebraska sort of mentioned this earlier, is that yes, we understand the economics of where everything is right now in farm country and corn and soybean country for sure. Herbicide programs, at least in his view, that's something we probably don't want to skip on, because that's a problem you're dealing with potentially 3, 4, 5 years down the road. So is there any conversations you have with your customers and agronomists from that standpoint in terms of herbicide programs and recommendations that match with your seed recommendations as well?
Yeah, for the most part, I'll go back to some of the like the generics. A lot of these branded products, safe products, are good and safe because they have safeners in them. I've been on several service calls over the years where the corn's dinged up a little bit because it was a challenging spring. Environmental wasn't there. Corn wasn't growing good. And typically that AI doesn't have problems. Well, then I find out it was actually a generic, and you can find out that it didn't have a safener into it. And the problems followed every single cornfield that had that particular chemistry on it. So if we start continuing down these paths of planting corn into more adverse conditions, we need to make sure we've got good quality herbicides that we trust, that are safe to the crops and have safeners in it, because a lot of times, that could set the corn crop back a little bit. So again, understanding what AI you got working with, from a soybean standpoint, we're advising folks to plant soybeans earlier. Well, so that typically means we're going to be following with the sprayer right behind it. Well, if we're moving up our planting date 2 to 3 windows compared to what we've typically done, my part of the world, instead of being the latter part of April, water hemp starts to wake up May. Okay, that residual that was with it is strong as the water hemp's waking up. Okay, we start planting soybeans first week of April now, putting that grass and water hemp residual with it. Over time, it's sitting there and it's starting to peter out because its half-life is broken down by sunlight and organic matter. So as it starts to peter out, water hemp's taken off. So in some environments, if we are going to alter our planting date based off our soybean recommendations, higher yields, we almost really just need to rethink how we're doing that chemistry, or at least be aware that, hey, if we change one variable, we're changing another one, we could end up getting another problem. And we are starting to see that in some areas. So just being aware that we probably need to tweak some things as we alter our planting date and when we're going to put the chemistry out there. So its highest load is aligning with when, our major problematic weed is germinating.
Yeah, knowing the weed calendar, right, is a really good point that you make there, and matching that with the right herbicide program.
Absolutely.
Is a huge thing. Want to get to one of the questions we had in the chat, and then kind of wrap this up with some final comments from you guys as we kick off planting for most of the Midwest. Again, like I said, some folks are already rolling, and if you are, be safe, and here's to a good year for you. But one question here on our Facebook, the ones watching on Facebook, in normal conditions, what is the ideal planting depth for soybeans? So I'll go to you, Lindsey, since you were talking about soybeans the most on this call. You get to answer the soybean question.
Hey, that's fine because soybeans never really get love. So, no, I would say in our part of the world, of course, in normal conditions, 1.5 to 2 inches wouldn't go any deeper than 2. So, kind of wherever that sweet spot is, if you can kind of tweak your planter and figure out what works best, but that's the range that we are looking at.
Okay, good deal. All right. Well, I don't think we have more questions yet, or if they haven't, I haven't seen any. And if you have one, please, even after this call, put it on one of our comments. We'll be happy to get to it after the live session. Thanks for all those who have joined us live. We appreciate your time this morning on a Friday morning, a lovely Friday morning, at least here in the St. Louis area, and sounds like up in Mike's territory too, but about to change. So hunker down here maybe over the weekends. But let's go around the horn one more time, and we'll start with Lindsey, Mike, and then end with you, Todd. Just kind of wrap this up for us. Everyone's excited about planting. It's an exciting time. It's one of hope, nervousness, and anxiousness at the same time. So kind of just your maybe 1 or 2 tips that you like to remind growers and seed pros and others in farm country that we need to think about as they head to the fields.
Yeah, so the first thing, if you're thinking about planting and maybe the weather forecast doesn't look great, start with beans. Like we mentioned, they're pretty tough, so we can put them through some hard weather and they'll be okay. But corn is king, and corn can't see a bad day. So just kind of think about our planting order. Also, have conversations with your seed pros, your FSRs, or your agronomists if you have any questions. This is what we're here for, and we're more than happy to help you guys out. So we're really looking forward to spring and excited to see new products and see our current lineup out there. So I hope everyone has a safe and good spring.
Yeah, Mike.
So I would echo Lindsey's comments right there. If you're going to start early with soybeans, make sure you got a good seed treatment on them. When I think about, corn, your seed pro and your agronomists and your FSRs are really good knowledge at helping you place those products on the right acre. And the last thing we want to do is to make sure a product is not going to fail. So we want to make sure, we're putting that right product on the right acre under the right conditions to maximize the full benefit of that product, to maximize not only the yield, but plant health and plant stature throughout the growing season. And the biggest thing is just staying safe. We've got a lot of moving parts going on out there, and anything can kind of happen. Equipment moving up and down the highway, seed tenders rolling along. It's just one thing. And we all understand when it's go time, it's go time. We want to go as fast as we can, but we want to make sure safety is the utmost importance. Just kind of think about that.
Yeah, get back home safe is the bottom line, no matter what. One quick question before Todd, I want you to wrap it up here, but Mike, I think from a corn perspective, planting recommendations are going to be planting depth on corn. Since it was asked about soybeans, we probably should have given corn, even though we give it a lot of love on this thing. We probably, let's answer that question while we have it here. So the question was exactly what is the recommended planting depth on corn, Mike, if you can handle that.
So, corn's king, and in my book, 2 inches is really the recommended to get it in it's good seed to soil contact, what you need. When I go back to that planter, when you think about those disc openers, if those disc openers are worn and you've got that kind of W trench in there, you're not getting that seed down in this trench firmly, and you're not getting good seed to soil contact. But 2 inches in that sweet spot, right where that moisture zone is the most benefit for corn.
Good deal. Thank you for that. Thanks for the question, Tim. And Todd, finally, your takeaway for as growers hit the field in your neck of the woods, what is your 1 or 2 things you want to remind them of?
Largely at the end of the day, control the controllables. We can't control everything out there. We can't control what goes on with the retailer, can't control what goes on in Mother Nature. Find the items that you can control going into planting and how that's going to impact, establishment and everything else. So find the little things that you can do and do them very well. At the end of the day, this crop is your financial source, and it's important that you take care of your family and your legacy. So make sure all those decisions are being done very wisely. And at the end of the day, things aren't going to go as planned. be willing to shoot from the hip. And if we get in a situation where we get in a string of heavy rains, a lot of replant, thinking about changing hybrids, changing crops, whatnot, seek out an advisor that you trust.
Mhm.
And so it might be somebody that you're currently working with, maybe somebody that's different. Just seek out some good advisors who can give you some good advice, because at the end of the day, when it's your crop, a lot of times growers are very emotionally tied to it. It's very hard to say, hey, we're going to replant this, or we're going to change this. There's always those emotional
Mhm.
pieces pulling at us, and I get it. I've been there. But find somebody who can give you very good, sound advice, who maybe isn't as emotionally tied to the crop, and just give some very good agronomic and business decisions. So seek out those good advisors.
Yeah, good deal. Well, I want to thank all of you for joining us here today. This was really insightful conversation from my novice agronomist perspective. So excited to get the season going. I know you guys are, and I want to just thank you guys for joining us, and hopefully we'll see you again on another one of these things. Maybe Harvest Palooza will be coming up, and we can put a nice bow on the season with the three of you again, maybe down the road. Thanks for the audience for joining us here too. Reminder to those out there, we have follow channel on Facebook, Instagram. We got a YouTube page. There's several local TAs like Lindsey or Mike that you can reach out to for Snapchat accounts, probably, or Instagram posts. All of our agronomists and FSRs have their own special way of communicating out agronomic information. Mike had mentioned that corn emergence risk tool earlier with those maps. It's a great way some of our agronomists are communicating with customers and seed pros. So find them on social media, find them through email or text, and let us know how we can help you from a channel brand perspective going forward. All of you out there, be safe this planting season. Enjoy it while you can as well. And we'll look forward to the next call at the end of April with y'all. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.